that's working. I think everything is working. And now I'm just going to get my coffee, and everything is beautiful. All right. So here we are in, where the hell are we? I know we're in North Carolina, but
We're actually in Moncure.
Moncure,
Mm.
North Carolina, and I'm with Alisa Esposito, who, as much as I hate Facebook, I have to give Facebook credit for introducing me to you, or giving you an avenue to say hi to me or whatever it was.
Absolutely.
I think it was on my Facebook fan page.
Was it? I don't know.
I hate to call you a
Yeah.
fan, but yeah, I have like a personal page for my cousins, so I can see my cousins,
Uh-huh.
and their dumb kids and stuff. But then, not that their kids are dumber than anyone else's kids. I just,
Yeah. It's
I'm
good for that too,
I'm a
Facebook. Yeah.
curmudgeon. You know how it is. But yeah, it was a long time ago that I first became aware of you.
Yeah. I um I actually did it. I came to this little town of Pittsburgh a couple of years ago, and we have a we're like the smallest town in on the Peshawkashaw circuit.
On the what?
Peshawkashaw.
Is that
So
like a stock car racing circuit,
it's
or?
actually like a community storytelling event, and
Oh,
you have to follow the guidelines of the like worldwide Peshawkashaw thing, and so it's six. It's 20 seconds to slide, and a certain number of slides, and the slides just keep moving. And my topic was sex and empire, and a lot of it was your book informing the gist of it, which was that um, the con- the growth of empires built on um, redirected sexual energy, and so that was a really great talk, and I think the town really enjoyed it, and it got on YouTube,
mm,
and I wanted you to hear it. I wanted you to know that you know
that,
you're yeah, it's a big deal, this dismantling civilization stuff, and it starts with
yeah.
um, I think sex and death is the root of it all. So I think it's really important to expose that, and think about it, and kind of bring it out there in the light to look at, and wonder about.
What was the
So
thesis? Do you remember how is empire redirected sexual energy? Is it sort of a Freudian thing? Civilization as, repressed sexual energy, then erupting into violence and domination, or do you remember what your angle was? I know it's hard to remember these things. Once you get done with it, you're like, whew, don't have to think about
yeah,
it anymore.
that's kind of what it is. But
Yeah.
but I mean, those are sex and death are the two big taboos, and original sin is, kind of the founding. Even if we don't believe it, even if we say that we are not Christian, or we don't take that religion, or those kind of doctrines, we're marinated in them, even if we don't
Mm.
believe in them. We're
Yeah.
marinated in the consequence of them, and
Right.
so control of human sexuality that really in our society is a result of agriculture and inheritance, and having to keep track of land, and who to pass things on to. That's a control system that's required. It's in the architecture of how we acquire more land and more stuff, and it's so. And then you've got the Protestantism on top of that, which is you can't, you must keep working, idle hands, and idle
Right.
hands in the devil's workshop, and you've got to
Because they'll touch your junk.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah,
Oh
it's
man.
all in there, and it's I don't think it's really, I don't think it's anything that anybody really wants to. It didn't start out, I don't think, with any kind of nefarious plan. It's just how to keep this thing going, it's
Yeah.
it's how it happens.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. I think you're right. this sense. I mean, original sin is really closely tied to the notion of opposition to the natural world, I think. Because as I'm often yammering about on this podcast and elsewhere, it's like there's inner nature and outer nature, and we've been told that they're both dangerous and want to ruin us. Like if you give way to your inner nature, you'll be a murderous, raping, pillaging maniac, according to the Hobbesian narrative.
Yeah.
And outer nature, meanwhile, is full of things that want to suck your blood and burrow into you and,
Exactly.
rip you apart and red in tooth and claw and all that. And so what's so interesting about that is like, wait a minute, if outer nature is not me and hates me and wants to kill me and eat me, and my inner nature is not me and I need to be suspicious of that, what am I?
You need to
Right?
be fixed.
Well, also, I'm fucked up, definitely,
Mm-hmm.
but what am I? Who is the me that all these things are in opposition to?
Right.
It's a non-physical, because my body's my enemy too, right? Because my
Yeah.
body wants me to fucking shit and do all these
Probably
things
biological things that
these
are
ugly, horrible,
Mhm.
shameful things. So what am I? Where am I in this? I'm some like angel.
exactly. And that whole narrative, just from the get-go, you cannot trust yourself. You are not to
Right.
be trusted. The world is not to be trusted.
Right.
Nobody around you is to be trusted.
Your children need to be beaten into submission.
Absolutely.
Their natures are their enemies and
Yeah.
yours as a responsible parent, right?
Yeah.
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Yeah.
What a fucked up way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you can see, I mean, when we submit our children to the system, and all the controls of the system, we think, oh, well, we're not going to church, so that's not part of my thing.
Right.
But you are still submitting your child to a system that
Right.
requires them to stand in line and ask to go to the
Right.
bathroom and
Right.
get a hall pass and go home and
Don't touch
do
themselves
and submit them to
Yeah.
grading.
Right.
To grading.
Right. Get
So
used to
messed
being
up.
compared. Get used to striving for approval of these arbitrarily chosen authority figures. Yeah, you're right. It's those of us lucky enough not to have been raised explicitly in a Catholic tradition or whatever. We think we're out of it. We're not out of it. It's everywhere.
No, it's everywhere.
It's
No. I mean,
inescapable.
you submit yourself to 15,000 hours, 18,000 hours of your developmental years to a compulsory system that tells you every minute that you can't trust yourself. You must submit to be graded and all of that. Like that.
Right.
That's just. Yeah. Then you get into like there is, I think, free will, but when you live in a world where you don't know that for your developmental years, and you don't learn that there's anything to be trusted in this world, then you just kind of an automaton, really, unless you decide to sit and stop and dismantle the thing, through wondering.
I mean, how many children? You can't expect that of a child.
No, not a child, but you can expect that that's what grown-ups do, and
Ideally, it
should do.
Should, but as we've just established, adults are the result of an entire childhood of being
Exactly.
shaped not to do that.
I know.
Precisely do not do that.
Yeah.
I was saying the other day on one of these Roma podcasts or something, like one of the things I'm most proud of in my life is that I don't own a single tie.
Oh, nice.
And I
Yeah.
haven't worn a tie. I can't remember. I think I
Yeah.
may have worn a tie as a joke to some party in the 80s or something, just to all my friends go, Chris has a tie on. But I can't remember. I mean, I think probably like when I worked in the Diamond District in 1985-6 was the last time I wore a tie, And what is a tie? It's
Oh,
a
I know.
fucking choke collar.
Yeah.
It's a sign of
reminder.
submission.
Uh-huh.
And it's this weird, and also I love how it's like the only bit of color
Yeah, that
on
you're
these
allowed.
gray suits.
And you have to put it on yourself.
Oh, is that worse that you have to put it on yourself, or
Oh
if
yeah,
you
it's worse because then you're participating in your own enslavement.
well,
Yeah.
what if the ritual were that you showed up to work with your tie and your boss put it on you every morning? That would be worse.
It's much easier for your boss.
That's right.
Like so
You're a
you
little late, Chris. Step up. And we're gonna tighten this a little extra tight today. Get with the program. And then I love how it's like a loving thing that your wife will do your tie
Yeah,
for
yeah.
you. Well, let me do that for you, honey.
Yeah.
Let me loop you into submission to the man so you can
Yeah.
bring home more money and we can go to a vacation in Cabo.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway.
It's dreadful.
So now that we've griped about the modern world, we've gotten that out of the way. So you're from Chicago originally?
Yeah.
You're
I'm from consumer culture suburbs of Chicago. The endless sprawl.
you're a
of malls.
suburban girl?
Yeah. I lived in the city for a while when I decided to move downtown for a few years when I was left early when I was 17. And lived there till I was 21.
Why did you leave early?
I just wanted to get on with I don't know. I went down to the city to work as a model for a while, and I didn't like that, and so I ended up being a studio manager for a photographer, and that's...
Why didn't you like being a model? That's the perfect life.
No,
Glamour.
I didn't like it.
Attention.
I felt stupid in front of the camera. I didn't like moving around and wiggling around and smiling when I didn't want to, and
Yeah,
shit like that just felt ridiculous.
I know, it is ridiculous. You're doing catalog work?
Yeah.
Is that-
Yeah,
so-
which was even worse.
So what, like underwear and
Shit like that.
Oh,
That was
really?
awful.
I'll do
Yeah.
that again.
No,
That's good.
no. I
For
won't.
those of you who are Patreon contributors and can see the video of this, you just saw. I hope that was a close up when you did that. What was that?
Yeah, I have a picture of myself, I
you're
think,
like,
and I don't.
Show me cute and surprised.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
that?
cute and
Yeah.
surprised over your cute little catalog clothes. From
You're wearing like a
Montgomery
sundress
Ward's.
or something.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Well, I'm gonna go back in my mom's old
Selling.
catalogs and see if I can find some. Is that
I can
Alisa?
say I was in Playboy.
Oh.
Playgirl.
Yeah.
But
before
it was
the
like
sex change.
because Chicago had its Playboy had its headquarters in Chicago.
Uh-huh.
So I went down there for a casting call once, and I ended up in the very last page of the men's fashion section. So I wasn't naked. I was just like this girl on the back of a bike.
You were an adornment.
Yeah.
A girl on a bike.
Yeah.
Do you remember which issue?
It was like, I don't know, but this was like 1988, so sometime in
88, guys. Go back into the catalog. I used
think
to
it's
have
kind
a
of fun
box
that I
of
could say that.
Playboys. I kind of learned about a lot of my sexual. God, this is sad, but my whole life can probably be explained by Playboy in some respect. Because my dad got Playboy, and I used to steal it from under his bed and read it when I was a little kid. This is before internet porn.
Yeah.
It was a simpler time, and but Playboy. I mean, it was very materialistic. You gotta get this motorcycle and this cool coat and all that. But as far as the sexual politics of it went, it was actually pretty cool, I would say. I mean, maybe people will slam me for thinking that, but yes, it objectified women, clearly, right? But the advisor, the Playboy advisor, which I always read, which is where people would write in and they're having problems with this or that. Actually, I think Susie Bright wrote that for a while. I think she told me it was always unsigned, but I think so different people, it was like Lassie, there would be different Lassies that came and went over the years. But I don't know, is that a weird connection? Connecting Lassie to a sex advice column?
I'm waiting to figure that out.
What should I do, Lassie?
Well, really, just do what Lassie does, and everything
Timmy's,
will be fine.
doggy style. It's always the answer. Doggy style. Trust me on this. Yeah, what the fuck am I talking about? Oh, the sort of attitude of Playboy of, it was pretty respectful, and it was like, be a nice guy, don't be a schmuck, and anyway, I don't know, I don't want to get into this, but much more than Hustler, for example.
Yeah, this is territory I don't know very well.
You haven't been in Hustler?
I mean,
Not yet.
No.
You never know.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think those days are done.
My literary agent also represents Larry Flint.
Oh, yeah?
So if you want to meet him, I've got a connection. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Larry,
I kind of like it out here in the woods.
Larry Flint likes it out here in the woods too. You ever see the movie? What was it called?
Yeah, that was
The
ages
People
ago.
versus Larry
Yeah.
Flint. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, it's an interesting film. Anyway, let's not get off onto Larry Flint.
Yeah. Okay.
Although he'd enjoy it
Mm-hmm.
if we. Yeah. Anyway, so Chicago modeling.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't like it. You started managing a photography studio so you could draw other victims into the modeling life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I booked the models, and I also worked as a building the sets and hiring the hair and makeup and all that stuff.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then that you and the photographer became a couple, and then hightailed it down to Florida on a
Yeah, we
bank
did.
robbing spree.
No,
Is
we
that-
just took I remember driving my, oh God, it was a Oldsmobile Cutlass.
Hey, I
It
had a
was-
Cutlass.
Yeah.
Was it a Cutlass Supreme?
Probably.
Oh,
And it had,
yeah,
I gotta tell this story.
yeah.
It was yellow, and it had big, like rust spots on it that were all over it. So it like resembled a giraffe or something. And it had one red door that was dented, and it had that vinyl on the roof that was tearing off. And so when I drive, it would just kind of flap in the breeze. And the back seat was like the foam was popping out of the ripped
Yeah.
seams and everything.
Fancy.
But we lived in a place where, you know, it was a photography studio, so we needed we had 5,000 square foot of open space. It was like an old factory, and so we lived in a place that was just not. It wasn't easy on vehicles. Like if you had a nice one, it gets stripped. So
This is
anyway,
in
we
Chicago,
didn't care anyway.
you're
We didn't
saying.
care about having a nice vehicle. I had a 1971 Buick Electra deuce and a quarter that could like stop on a dime and take off on a dime, and it was like we just had these ridiculous vehicles. And so I remember one morning leaving to go to the suburbs to visit my mother, you know, driving these big like wrecked ridiculous cars out there to the perfect kind of suburbs and parking that shit right outside, right out front, you know.
And people are calling the cops.
So, but I'm leaving one morning, and it's Sunday morning, it's quiet, and I hear screaming, and it's coming from the alley that's next to the building. And so we'd have like in this area, like we'd have these crazy, like one time we had to, my partner at the time, this photographer, he had a gun in the house and in the studio, and there was this woman just getting her face beat into the gravel outside. The guy was going to rape her. He climbed up the ladder to look out the little portal window that we could see in the middle of the giant glass block windows, and I hear the screaming. I wake up and I hear gunshot, and he shoots the gun into the viaduct just to make a gunshot.
Your boyfriend did.
Yeah, just to make a sound of a gunshot,
Right.
because this guy was going to
Attract
kill
the
this
police
woman.
or something.
No, I mean, there was no police around there. This was like, yeah. So anyway, the guy gets off of her, jumps into his running vehicle, and just leaves. And she's on the ground, like with gravel in her face. Her face is beat to a pulp. And so that happens in the parking lot outside. And at night, during the day, it's like a very busy trucks are coming in and out, you know, beep, 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 and you know, everything, all this activity. But during the evening, nothing. And so we have like packs of wild dogs going by, and like one time there was a vehicle out in that parking lot that was just in flames, just burning. You'd hear the squeaky wheel of like a homeless guy, like with his cart full of stuff, like going down to sleep by the tracks. And then right down at Lake in Ogden, there was all the street hookers, and they would bring their tricks into the alleyway in between our building and the next one. So you'd hear them out there. It's like, oh, there they are. You know, you see like the activity of what was going on in between looking down into the window, you know, blowjob happening, and then you'd find like condoms, used condoms and stuff all over. Anyway, I was leaving on this Sunday morning to go visit my mother, and I hear the screaming, and this woman, this hooker is running for her life, like in high heels. She looks like Hill Street Blues. Like her wig is fucking crooked, and she's got a mini. It looks like one of like fucked up Mary Jane girl. And so I stop, and I'm like, "Can I help you with anything?" And she's like, and my dog's in the back seat, and he loves to ride in the car. So he's like, "Yeah, we're going," and he's like back and forth, this window, that window, this window, that one, and the woman's like looking in the back seat, going, "I can't get in there with the dog." Like she wasn't gonna get in there with the dog, so. I'm like, "Okay, get in the front seat, come on, let's go." She's like, "There's a guy after me, I gotta, okay," and she's like, wasting time, get in the seat, get in the car. And she just looking at the dog like she's not getting in the car. So you remember the description of my car.
Yeah.
Yellow, red door, flapping vinyl.
Right.
Well, imagine a hooker on the front
She jumped on the hood?
On the hood.
So she's like, gonna sled it.
She's like, I'll just get on the hood.
Yeah.
So she jumps on the hood, and I'm like, "Okay, let's go." I'm gonna take her down to her corner.
Mini skirt flapping in the breeze. Yeah.
And she's holding on, man, because there's potholes, and there's like railroad tracks, and there's like a set of dead tracks, and there's more potholes, and I know how it is, so I'm like trying to look out and drive careful and everything, and not knock her off.
And the guy's on foot who's chasing her?
I hadn't seen the guy. We were going, I guess,
right,
fast enough that he never appeared on the scene.
Wow.
And then I got to the next set of tracks that I knew were going to knock her off. And I was like, "Listen, you got to get off of there and get in the car." So she finally did. And then I found out that the guy wanted his money back. He wanted his $20 back because she couldn't get him off.
Is that how that works? Is there a satisfaction guarantee with hookers? I've never negotiated that sort of deal. I don't know.
No. Anyway, that's what happened, and I dropped her off at the corner and went on to my mom's and told her the story.
Oh, like Mom. Hey, Mom. How's your day, honey? Oh, well, thanks for asking, Mom.
I know, and I told her
I had a hooker
at
on
the
hood
time
of
it was
car.
Now I can look back and think I kind of want to paint that scene because it had to be epic. But I can't.
But at the time it was just
like
day.
another day. So I just went home and told my mom about how I was late because of this thing, and she's still like.
Well, if the guy chasing her had been a cop, you could be in jail now.
Right.
You'd be like, what would they call that? Assisting in the commission of a felony or something.
Right. I hadn't thought of that.
You were the getaway driver.
I was the getaway car.
Yeah.
That's right.
Although in court, it would be great to hear that in court, like, well, but she did. No, Your Honor. Objection. The suspect did not get in the car. She got on the car.
Yes.
Does that count? Let's see. And then you'd be arguing, no, I didn't stop. I stopped to see if she was all right, and she just jumped on the car.
Yeah.
I didn't invite her to, Your Honor. I was a victim. There was a hooker jumped on my car. What was I to do?
Okay, so I don't know why I got off on that story. You asked me something about. We drove that car down to Florida, and it didn't. No, that's not true.
No.
Oh shit! I should tell what really happened.
Oh, tell what really happened.
At one point, though, I really did. At one point, I really did drive it to Florida, and it had the wrong plates. Plates were expired, so I took plates from another car and stuck it on that car.
Oh, statute of limitations.
And
it's done.
It was like. And I didn't have a driver's license.
Oh.
And everything was wrong about it. But still, I made it to Florida.
You were.
And then
you were a crazed child.
When we were done with that car.
What kind of fashion model were you?
I wasn't. See, I couldn't do it.
Your teeth are so straight, though. Look at that.
I never had braces.
Really?
No.
You're just born with
These
a perfect smile. That's amazing.
Okay, so I'll tell you what I did with the car when we were done with the car.
All right,
we drove it down.
You burned it in a swamp.
No, we drove it down to the. We drove it down kind of to like the edge of the loop where the big train station is. Where everybody gets on and goes to the suburbs. I can't remember what it's called.
Oh,
Metro.
We're talking
Amtrak
Miami here, or
Northwestern
Chicago?
train station, like the big train station in Chicago.
Chicago. Okay.
Yeah, and we drove it down there. We scratched the vehicle identification number off of it and took off the plates and just drove it down there and parked it at the parking lot. Park it on the street.
Did you leave the keys in it?
No, and this wasn't my idea. This was
Why would you do that instead of
I guess
you could get 500
I
bucks
don't
for
know.
scrap metal or
I don't know
something?
why. I was like, okay, well, this is what we're doing. You know,
Hmm.
I was 17 and the photographer that I was with was 34, and they're like, okay, we're going to
My
Florida and we're gonna
God, a
leave
man
this.
twice your age. That's scandalous.
Yeah, yeah. But you
That
know, when
that
you're
should
running
be
from the
illegal.
suburbs and you know you've got your textbook daddy issues on your heels, that's the way it goes.
Was your daddy a textbook salesman?
Nobody was a salesman.
Was he? What did he
Hmm.
sell?
He sold appliance parts for Maytag and like
Oh, he
his
was the
company
lonely
was
Maytag guy.
he was like he worked for ITW Fastex and that company made little tiny parts that appliance companies needed
Right.
to build their appliances. So
Right.
he would go around and sell those. He was a traveling salesman. He'd go all over the South mostly, I think,
Hmm.
selling that shit.
Right.
And it makes I have a lot of compassion for him now that I you know it's got to be difficult, you know, like I had a lot of anger for years about you know not seeing him and him getting remarried and having clearly chosen his new family, and I just felt like an inconvenience. And
Were you the only
no, my
child?
sister and I, yeah.
So
So we
two
would
girls with your mother, and then he. How old were you when they split?
they divorced when I was 9.
Oh, that's really hard.
That's a bad time, right?
Yeah.
So
I can remember having nightmares. Like every other couple, my parents would have arguments sometimes, and I can remember literally having nightmares that they were going to get divorced. I was so terrified
mhm.
of the possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
I was a daddy's girl too.
deep
Like
wound.
I loved like I just loved to like go fishing with him and catch frogs with him and be out camping in the woods and then that all just kind of crumbled and then I see him like once every couple weeks and I just you know it just felt like a side note and
Mm.
so but and there you know there was some things that happened and were said that really I think scarred me deeply for a long time. But now I don't even need to talk about them. It's just because I look at the man that was just doing his best in this world where you know we're just not allowed to be human, you know, and we're just you know meant to like pay
Yeah.
the mortgage and pay the rent and buy the groceries and get the health insurance and you know make sure everybody's happy and like uh, it's just a cage. It's a cage of accumulation and coping, and so I don't.
You're good. A cage of accumulation and coping. That's almost poetry right there.
Thanks.
That's like Jesse Jackson shit. That alliteration. Is that a Chicago thing? You Chicago people. That's good. A cage of a cage of alliteration.
Accumulation.
A cage of accumulation and coping.
No, I just thought of that just now. I've never said that before.
I'm going to use that in Civilized to Death, and
Good.
people are going to say, "Oh, Chris, you're such a great writer," and I'll be like, "Yep, came up with that one all on my own." I'll edit it out of this just to cover my tracks, So okay, so you were living with your mom. Was she working, or how were she supporting this suburban lifestyle? Did
She
she remarry?
remarried,
Oh,
and
okay.
they were typesetting back before there were computers, so they were like putting together magazines like by cutting out text and laying it, and you know however
Right.
they did,
And
and
what was
then-
your relationship like with your stepfather?
I was trying. Yeah, I just really couldn't wait to get out of there. That's
you
why
the
I
older
left
sister
when I
or
was
younger?
17. Oldest.
You're
Yeah.
older.
I left when I was 17 and moved downtown and
Did your sister get pissed off about that?
I don't really know. I left and I didn't really talk to anybody for about 6 years probably.
Really?
Yeah, we moved to Florida and I worked we spent every last bit of savings so we could, like we tried to make a go of doing photography in Miami, but it just wasn't for either one of us really. We
Did
didn't
you
like
marry this guy?
No,
or
no, no, no. I just stayed with him for 8 years. He was a raging alcoholic. And, but he was just sad. I mean, his family life was dreadful too. Like everyone in his family's an addict. His parents were crazy. They were. So it's just another kind of, cage of accumulation and coping over there that resulted in his particular
Yeah.
psychosis
Right.
or lunacy or.
And you guys sort of resonated in some ways.
Yeah,
I
and
guess.
I loved animals, and I loved working with critters and helping small forgotten things, So
All right.
I know now, looking back, that my need, like, we worked for this wildlife rehabilitation center in Fort Lauderdale, which is still there. It's called the Wildlife Care Center, and there were like 10,000 animals a year that would go through there. And the thing that I could do that no one else could do was raise these little tiny precocial shorebirds. So they hop out of the egg and they start running around after the parents and learning pretty quickly how to pick things up, but they get really stressed really easily. And so people would find them running around and think that they were like fallen out of the nest or whatever. So, but they were fine, but they wanted to help, and so they'd grab the things, were perfectly fine, healthy birds, and they bring them into this place, and then after a few hours, they would be dead because they'd just sit there peeping for their parents and never know and never learn how to, and be stressed to the max, and never learn how to pick up their own food. But it's kind of one of my proudest things that I was able to take such care and create the perfect kind of natural place for them to. I wasn't forcing them to eat worms to keep them alive. Like, I had to create a little world for them where they felt safe, where they didn't feel the stress, where they couldn't perceive what was outside of this natural world that I built for them. And I would not let them see me, and I would just drop worms in front of them so that they, like little mealworms, so that they would catch that little movement would catch their eye, and they'd go get it, and I'd be like, okay, that one's eaten, it knows how to do it, and it's going to be fine. And I had, like, I don't know, I probably raised, 50, 60 of those birds. It was a number of different types of them. And so I'm just realizing now that that's I hadn't realized that,
I was just gonna say, the writer in me has just come up with the metaphor for your life, right?
Yeah, I didn't realize that. Just now I'm realizing that I had, that what I'm doing here trying to do here is what I was doing there on a micro scale.
Right.
Yeah, I think that was really formative for me. But I didn't articulate it until just this moment, that's kind of what I've been on the heels of all of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, and the insight that you can't force. I remember there's some quote somewhere, like, you can't. It was something like, I'm paraphrasing, but it was like, the key to being a great teacher isn't knowing how to teach; it's knowing how to create an environment in which learning can happen.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, your insight is, you don't force them to eat. You create an environment where they're comfortable enough, and you mimic in some ways, or try to replicate the natural rhythms and environment, and then they will eat.
Yeah, something opens up where, you take the stress out, you take all the stuff that's in the way of perception out of the way.
Right.
And that's really what we have to do,
and let them be what they are.
Yeah, let them be what they are.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, okay, audience, hold that thought in your heads, because that's where we're coming back to. That's why we're sitting here in this metalworking studio in the middle of a forest in South Carolina, or North Carolina. Yeah, interesting. So let's continue with the story then. So you're with this guy, and the phrase precocial birds?
Precocial, yeah.
What does that mean?
It means that they're a robin is an altricial bird. It will stay in the nest for about 2 weeks while it grows. It comes out of the egg, like a human baby, just like
right.
It's helpless and ugly. It has no wings. It has
shitting on itself.
It's got no fur
squealing.
or feathers. It's just, it can't regulate its body temperature. Its mother has to brood it.
Right.
and then eventually it gets to where it fledges, and that, you know, can take 2 to 3 weeks.
And that's when the feathers come out.
Yeah.
Right.
And so they would never be on the ground. Those kind of birds would never be on the ground unless they were
They fell.
close to fledging or had fallen.
Yeah.
So precocial, it's like a duckling or a chicken, like a chick baby.
They come out of the egg more or less
They're
intact
yeah.
and ready to go.
Yeah.
Right. Precocial. That's an interesting word. Precocious. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. So, so people, if you find little birds that look like birds running around, leave them alone. I guess that's. Well, there's another cool, interesting metaphor there. The thinking that you're rescuing something that you're actually destroying.
Yep.
That's
true.
That's probably the biggest tragedy there is.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody wants to help in a world where everything is seemingly struggling.
Yeah.
It says something about the human spirit.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it also says something about the confusion.
And here comes a car. This is nice. A car is driving through our podcast. This is a first. Let's see, who's that? Wow, it's a fancy car too. It's an Audi convertible. Who could this be?
Hey, Lyle.
Hey,
We're running podcast.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. All right.